Welcome to the FTTM podcast, your guide to getting the right product to the market at the right time.
It's great to be here. We have a really fascinating topic to get into today.
We really do. For this deep dive, we're doing something a little different.
Yeah.
We're not looking at a specific industry, not really. We're looking at the operating system behind how things get built.
At how behind the what?
Exactly. We are digging into a methodology called fast time to market, or FTTM.
Yeah.
And our guide for this is exclusively the Lateral Works research.
And it's such a compelling body of work. It's not academic theory. It's forged in the fire of these incredibly high-stakes, high-pressure product development cycles.
High stakes is the right word. Let's set the stage for a second. We're not talking about, a simple software app here. The Lateral Works research focuses on what they call the bleeding edge.
Right. Think semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, massive, complex hardware systems.
The kind of projects where a one-week slip doesn't just, annoy your boss. A one-week slip could mean you miss the entire market window. You lose.
It's a world where you're often starting a project before the fundamental science is even 100% proven. The level of uncertainty is it's off the charts.
And that actually brings me to the real hook for me. I was reading through the research and it made me think about my own experience. I think most of us have this picture of project management in our heads.
Sure. Gantt charts, status meetings.
Gantt charts, status meetings, the little red, yellow, green bubbles. It all feels very orderly. It feels like you're in control. But the research asks this question that, honestly, it made me really uncomfortable. It asks, what if project management as a discipline is actually the wrong tool for the job when you're on that bleeding edge?
It's a brave question to ask. It's almost heretical, isn't it? I mean, we have entire industries built around certifications like the PMP, Agile coaching.
All over it.
And this research comes along and says, that's all fine, but in these hyper-fast environments, that whole apparatus actually creates friction. It slows you down.
They don't mince words. There's a line that just says, flat out, FTTM is not project management.
And that's the core conflict we're going to explore. It's this idea that when speed is your primary objective, the traditional tools of control and risk aversion can become your worst enemy. It's a totally different beast.
Okay, so let's lay out the roadmap for our deep dive. First, we need to really break down why traditional PM fails in these specific environments.
Yeah, the fundamental disconnect.
Then I want to get into the psychology of this system.
Yeah.
There's a concept in the research called pulling pain forward.
Which sounds awful.
Sounds like a medieval torture technique, but it might just be the secret sauce here. We'll also talk about the happy schedule trap, which I think everyone listening will recognize.
Oh, absolutely. The land of wishful thinking.
And then the main event. I want to spend a lot of time on this head-to-head showdown the research lays out. Normal teams versus FTTM teams. Because the difference is they're not just procedural, they're deeply cultural.
That's where it all comes together. You realize this isn't about a new kind of spreadsheet. It's about how a team handles truth and pressure.
Exactly. So let's start at the beginning, part one, defining the beast. What exactly is FTTM, according to the Lateral Works research? Because fast time to market is a buzzword people throw around all the time.
It is. It's usually just a generic goal, like we want more synergy. But here, FTTM is a very specific, structured system. And the first thing they do is clarify what it is not.
Oh.
It's not a development methodology. So it isn't agile. It isn't waterfall or Scrum or Kanban.
That's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
Because the knee-jerk reaction for most companies when they want to go faster is just to say, okay, we're doing Agile now. And then they buy a ton of sticky notes.
Right. And they think that's the solution. But FTTM isn't at that level. The research calls it a development execution tool. It's the framework within which you might use something like Agile. It's a system for organizing the chaos.
So it's a layer above the day-to-day methodology.
Precisely. And it focuses on just 4 things: time, team, product, and environment. The argument is simple. You can have the world's best engineers, the team, and a brilliant idea, the product. But if your relationship with time is broken and your corporate environment is toxic, you will fail. You will be slow.
There's a phrase in the research that I keep coming back to. It says, we are not project managers, rather we are system integrators. That word choice feels very deliberate. What's the difference?
It's a huge difference in mindset. Think about the classic project manager role. A lot of the time, they're seen as administrators.
Task trackers.
Exactly. They track tasks, they report status, they chase people for updates. They're often one step removed from the actual engineering work. A system integrator, in this FTTM context, is completely different.
How so?
Their job is to be the mechanic. They are physically and intellectually linking the moving parts of the development machine, the engineering, the marketing, the supply chain, to make sure they function as a single, coherent unit.
So it's less about checking boxes like, did you do your task?
Yeah.
And much more about, do all these different pieces of work actually fit together right now to achieve the goal?
You've got it. And that leads directly to this core dichotomy in the research: control versus speed.
Right.
Traditional project management is fundamentally obsessed with achieving maximum control.
Which, I mean, that makes sense on the surface. If you're a senior executive, you want control. You want predictability. You want to know what's going on.
Of course you do. But here's the paradox the research points out. In these environments, the pursuit of maximum control leads to maximum interrupts.
What do you mean by interrupts?
Every time a team member has to stop doing the work to write a report for you, that's an interrupt. Every time an engineer has to wait a week for a steering committee to approve a minor spec change, that's an interrupt.
So every act of control from management actually injects a delay, a latency into the system.
It's a drag coefficient on the project. The research is blunt. Too much control equals slow. But, and this is key, they're not advocating for chaos, because too little control also equals slow.
Because everyone just runs off in different directions.
Anarchy. So the FTTM solution isn't no control, it's minimum control.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means you constantly ask the question, what is the absolute minimum amount of reporting, of bureaucracy, of meetings we can get away with and still be confident we're all moving toward the same goal? The job is system integration, not task policing.
I love the mantra they use to guide that. The schedule is king.
It's the absolute law of the land. In a normal project, we think of the schedule as a forecast, a prediction. We're forecasting a finish in June.
It's a guideline.
It's a hope. In FTTM, the schedule is a hard constraint. It's not a prediction, it's the boundary condition. We will be done in June. Period. So if something goes wrong, you don't debate moving the date, you figure what it takes to get back on track.
That's where that other phrase comes in.
Yeah.
You pay to save a day.
That's the economic model of FTTM. It's a profound mental shift. It means you have explicitly calculated that your time is more valuable than your cash.
And that kind of thinking is only possible because of the environment these teams exist in. The Lateral Works research uses some pretty intense language to describe it.
And they do. They say it's war, not peacetime.
I have to admit, when I first read that, I rolled my eyes a little. Every tech startup talks about being in a war for talent or whatever.
It can sound like hyperbole.
It can.
Yeah.
But the more I read, the more I realize they don't mean it as a metaphor for we're working really hard. They mean it literally in terms of the rules of engagement.
That's the key. In peacetime, you follow the established rules. You have a formal hierarchy. You go through the proper channels. You worry about office politics and not stepping on anyone's toes.
You fill out the TPS report.
You fill out the reports. In war, the only thing that matters is the objective, taking the hill. You don't care about the org chart. You care about who has the skills and the information to solve the immediate problem.
There's a quote in the research that says, "The task is frankly impossible in time, yet possible if non-traditional thinking is applied." I mean, just imagine being the leader of a project and that's your starting point.
It's terrifying. It's a direct admission that if you follow standard operating procedure, you will fail. The system is designed to fail you.
So you have to operate outside the normal system.
You have to. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
FTTM teams are designed to be antibodies to the inefficiency that peacetime organizations can tolerate. They hate hierarchy. They despise what the research calls nonsense reporting of half-truths.
Okay, let's pause on that phrase for a second. Nonsense reporting of half-truths. That feels painfully familiar.
It's the language of corporate survival, isn't it?
It's that weekly meeting where, deep down, you're totally stuck on a problem, but you stand up and say, yeah, we're tracking green, making good progress.
Because you don't want to be the bearer of bad news. You don't want to be the negative one, so you tell a half-truth. You shade the status yellow instead of bright red.
And in a normal company, everyone just kind of accepts it.
It's part of the game. But in FTTM, that behavior is poison. Because if you're hiding a problem, you are stealing time from the team, time they could be using to solve it. And if the schedule is king, stealing time is treason.
That's a perfect transition into the whole psychology of this, because you can put a poster on the wall that says it's war. But that doesn't change human nature. People generally want to be safe. They want to be liked.
They want to avoid conflict.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you get them to act this way? And that brings us to part 2, the psychology of speed. And this really wild concept of pulling pain forward.
This, for me, is the absolute core of the FTTM mindset. It's the psychological unlock that makes everything else possible. The mandate is to accelerate pain to create urgency.
Which is so counterintuitive. Most of us, myself included, spend our entire lives trying to avoid pain, to push it off. Ugh, I'll deal with that difficult conversation tomorrow. I'll look at those scary budget numbers next week.
It's human nature. Procrastination on bad news. But let's just think through the mechanics of a project timeline. Imagine you discover a fundamental flaw in your core design in the second week of a year-long project.
Okay.
That's painful, right? You have to admit you were wrong. You have to throw away 2 weeks of work. People might think you look stupid. It's embarrassing.
It's definitely painful.
But you have 50 weeks to fix it. Now, imagine you discover that exact same fatal flaw 2 weeks before the product is supposed to launch.
Oh, that's not pain. That's a catastrophe.
That's a catastrophe. That's a company might go at a business level event. The product is recalled. The stock price craters. People get fired. The pain is 1,000 times worse.
So the logic is, you'd rather have a really bad headache today than a massive fatal heart attack in 6 months.
That is the exact logic. But our instincts fight it every step of the way. The research talks about head in the sand planning.
Just pretending the problem doesn't exist.
Or my favorite, the pray for a miracle strategy.
I have lived the pray for a miracle strategy. That's when you have a critical dependency on another team or a vendor, and you know they're trending late, but you just keep their tasks green on your chart and hope really, really hard that they'll magically catch up.
And in the meantime, you're not developing a backup plan. You're not escalating. You're just praying. In FTTM, everything looks great is actually treated as a danger signal.
That's fascinating. So good news is treated with suspicion.
Deep suspicion. If a team member comes into the daily meeting and says, no problems to report, everything's on track, the FTTM leader doesn't say, great job. They say, you're not looking hard enough. Go find the problems.
That sounds absolutely exhausting. To be in a culture that is constantly hunting for what's broken.
It is exhausting. It's relentless. But it's the only way to manufacture time. You find the truth early to give the team the maximum possible runway to solve the hardest problems.
This leads right into the idea of the happy schedule versus the realistic schedule. The lateral works research really dissects this. What defines a happy schedule?
A happy schedule is basically wishful thinking codified into a Gantt chart. It is a project plan that is built on the silent, unstated assumption that literally nothing will go wrong.
The supplier won't be late, no one will get sick, the code will compile perfectly on the first try.
The laws of physics will be temporarily suspended for our benefit.
So why do we do it? I mean, on some level, everyone in the room knows it's a lie.
The research gives some very specific, very human reasons. The biggest one is to avoid punishment for management. If your CEO stands up at the all hands and says, we must ship this product by Q3, and you're the engineering lead who has to build the schedule, presenting a plan that says best case is Q4 feels like career suicide.
You're going to get labeled not a team player, negative, not a can-do attitude.
All of it. So what do? You create a schedule that hits the Q3 date. You just make all the task durations a little shorter than you know they'll really be. You pretend there are no risks.
Yeah.
That's the happy schedule. It's a social contract where everyone agrees to believe in a fantasy for a little while.
Because the dream state, as the research calls it, feels good.
It feels much better than the ugly truth.
So what's the alternative? The realistic schedule.
The realistic schedule is built on the opposite premise. It's based on historical data. It assumes things will go wrong. It has buffer built in. And inevitably, the realistic schedule shows a finish date that is later than the happy schedule. And that creates what the research calls the gap.
The gap. Let's really define that. The lateral works research has this great visual for it, the time to intercept chart. Can you describe that?
Sure. Imagine a simple graph. Time is on the bottom, the x-axis, and work remaining is on the vertical y-axis. You start at the top left with all your work to do, and your goal is to get to the bottom right with 0 work left.
Okay.
Now, you draw a vertical line. That's the target date. That's the date the boss wants. That's Q3. Then you plot your actual projected progress as a line sloping down. In a happy schedule, you just draw a line that magically hits 0 right on the target date.
It looks perfect, but it's fiction.
Total fiction. In a realistic schedule, you let the data dictate the slope of that line. And almost always, that line crosses the 0 work axis after the target date. The horizontal distance between where your line actually ends and that vertical target date line. That's the gap.
And the central idea of FTTM is Don't hide the gap. Make it the centerpiece.
Exactly. Don't bury it in an appendix. Put it on a giant monitor in the middle of the room. Make it big, make it red. Every single day, the first thing the team sees is a chart that says, we are currently projected to miss our launch by 6 weeks.
I can hear managers listening to this having a panic attack. My first instinct would be, don't show that to the executives. It'll get us all fired.
And in a dysfunctional, low-trust culture, it might. But in an FTTM culture, it's the opposite. The gap is not a failure. It's the catalyst for action. The research says people get creative when pressed against the wall. If you hide the 6-week gap, the team feels no real pressure. They just chug along doing their work the normal way. But if everyone on the team is forced to stare at that 6-week gap every single morning, the conversation changes.
The urgency becomes real.
It becomes unavoidable. Someone eventually says, okay, our standard validation process takes 8 weeks. That's why we have this gap. It's not going to work. What if we completely re-architected the tests to run in parallel? Could we do it in 3 weeks?
You're forcing the breakthrough thinking. You're forcing the trade-offs.
You are. You expose the gap to create the urgency that is required to close the gap. It's manufactured pressure.
The stakes on this were made crystal clear for me by one of the case studies in the research. The $5 B fab example.
Oh, that's a fantastic one. It's a classic FTTM scenario. You have a company building a new bleeding-edge semiconductor factory, a fab. The capital investment is, as the name suggests, enormous.
Billions of dollars.
But the market window for the chips they're going to produce is incredibly short. So they did the math. They calculated the cost of delay.
And the number they came up with is just, it's hard to even comprehend.
It is $5 million per day.
Let's just sit with that for a second. Every single day the factory is late in opening, the company loses $5 million in pure profit that it can never get back.
Now imagine you're the leader of that project. You're in your daily meeting. One of your key equipment vendors says, hey, we're having a little trouble. We might need to push our delivery from this Friday to next Monday.
Just a weekend.
Just a weekend. In a normal project, you'd sigh, you'd update your Gantt chart, and you'd say, okay, try to make it Monday morning.
Right.
In the FTTM mindset, with that cost of delay number burned into your brain, you hear something completely different. You hear, I am about to set fire to $15 million of our company's money.
It fundamentally changes the biology of the decision. You can't just accept it.
You are physically incapable of accepting it. The research shows they use these macro-micro schedules and a process of daily refresh planning to manage this. Because when a day is worth $5 million, you can justify almost any expense to save it.
Like what?
Need to charter a private jet to fly a critical part from Germany instead of waiting for standard air freight. Do it. The jet costs $20,000, but it saves $5 million. It's not even a question. It's the easiest business case in the world.
And what was the outcome of that project?
They delivered 2 weeks ahead of the target schedule.
So by finishing early, they basically created an extra $70 million in profit out of thin air.
That is the economic power of this system. But and this is the perfect segue to our next section, you absolutely cannot get that result with what the research calls a normal team. It's impossible. You need a completely different kind of organizational DNA.
Let's get into that. This is the showdown.
Yeah.
Part 3, the deep dive on normal teams versus FTTM teams. The Lateral Works research gives a super detailed 13-point comparison, and the contrasts are just, they're night and day.
They really are.
Let's start with the one at the very top, leadership. How does a normal team leader differ from an FTTM leader?
In a normal team, the research describes the project leader as, at best, a part-time coordinator.
I've had this job before. I think of it as the project beggar. You have the title of project manager, but you have no actual power. You spend your days going from department head to department head, begging for resources. Can I please have a little bit of Jane's time next week?
That's it exactly. You have all of the responsibility, but none of the authority. The real power stays locked up in the functional silos, the engineering department, the marketing department.
Okay, so what's the FTTM version?
In an FTTM team, the project leader is called the project monarch.
The project monarch. That sounds, I don't know, a little arrogant.
It's designed to sound that way. It's a statement. It signifies singular, unambiguous authority over the project. The project monarch is a full-time, dedicated role. They work on nothing else. And critically, they have real decision-making power.
What does that look like?
They don't go to the VP of engineering and ask if they can change a specification to meet the schedule. They go to the VP of engineering and inform them that the specification is changing. They hold the budget. They control the resources.
That must cause an incredible amount of friction and turf wars in a traditional hierarchical company.
It causes a huge amount of friction. It completely upends the traditional power structure.
Yeah.
But the FTTM philosophy is simple. If you have to ask for permission, you are already too slow.
Okay, let's move to the next point. Loyalty and bias. This is a subtle one that I think most of us don't even consciously think about in our day-to-day jobs.
It's huge, though. In a normal team, the research says members have a functional bias.
Meaning?
Let's say I'm a mechanical engineer on your project. In a normal company, my primary loyalty is to the mechanical engineering department. My boss is the director of NA. My performance review is written by him. My path to promotion is inside that department.
So you want to impress your functional boss.
Always. I want to design the most elegant, technically perfect mechanical solution because that's what my department values. The functional requirements trump the project's requirements. If the perfect solution takes an extra month, my bias is to say, we should take the month and do it right.
And in an FTTM team.
The loyalty flips completely. Members are selected because they have a project bias. The research says, it is a mission, not a job. My loyalty is no longer to my old department. It's to the project monarch and to the launch date.
So in that scenario, if the elegant solution makes the project late,
I throw in the trash without a second thought. I design the good enough solution that meets the customer's needs and allows us to ship on time. The success of the mission is the only thing that matters.
but that only works if the reward structure changes, right? If my old functional manager is still the one deciding my bonus, I'm going to listen to him.
You've hit on a critical implementation detail. For FTTM to work, you often have to change the HR systems. The project monarch needs to have primary input into the performance reviews and compensation of the core team members.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's talk about team structure and ownership.
In a normal team, members are usually part-time. They're representatives from their department. They might be juggling 3 or 4 other projects at the same time.
They're distracted. And they come to the project meeting, they take notes, and their most common phrase is, okay, interesting point. I'll have to take that back to my team and get their feedback.
They're a messenger. They don't have the authority to make a decision in the room. This is a massive source of delay.
The dreaded, I have to ask my boss.
Right. In contrast, the FTTM core team is what the research calls heavyweight. And that means 2 things. First, they are dedicated, 100%. This project is their only job. Second, they are empowered. They are senior enough and trusted enough to make decisions for their function right there in the room. No, I'll get back to you.
The research uses a really powerful analogy for this. It compares the FTTM team to equity owners in a small business.
It's the difference between being a renter and an owner.
Explain that.
A renter, if the faucet is leaking, they call the landlord. It's the landlord's problem to fix.
Yeah.
An owner. An owner goes and gets a wrench and fixes the leaky faucet at 10 o'clock at night because it's their house and they don't want to see it get damaged.
Then the water bill is their problem.
Exactly. FTTM teams act like they own the profit and loss statement of the project. They have skin in the game. Normal teams are just participating.
Let's do the next one. Comparison point 4. Blame versus learning. In my experience, normal teams are perfectly optimized for one thing. CYA. Cover your
assets, yes. In a normal team, when a deadline is missed, what's the very first thing that happens?
The finger pointing begins, and everyone runs to their email to find the message that proves it wasn't their fault.
A huge amount of time and energy is spent creating a documentary trail, building a legal defense for your own performance review. See, I sent the request on Tuesday, but they didn't respond until Friday, so the slip is their fault, not mine.
And all of that energy contributes absolutely zero to actually fixing the problem or shipping the product.
0. It's pure waste. In an FTTM team, because of that pulling pain forward mindset, the focus is completely different. It's fail fast.
Which is another buzzword, but what does it mean here?
It means that failure is treated as data, not as a crime. The team shares failures openly and immediately. Why? Because they know a small failure that's hit her today will metastasize into a giant project-killing disaster tomorrow.
So if you mess up, the expectation is you raise your hand in the daily meeting and say, I messed up, here's the impact, and I need help fixing it.
Yes. And the team's reaction isn't to blame the person. It's to swarm the problem. How do we solve this? The focus is entirely forward-looking.
Okay. Reporting structure. This seems to tie back directly to the Project Monarch idea.
It's simple, but it's structurally critical. In a normal team, you report to your functional manager. In an FTTM team, your primary solid line reporting relationship is to the team leader, the monarch.
And what about your old boss?
You might have a dotted line back to your functional department, maybe for technical standards or career development. You know, you can't have electrical engineers designing circuits that violate the laws of physics. But for your day-to-day priorities, for what you work on today, the monarch is the boss. End of story.
All right, the last one, and it's a controversial one, especially in today's world, location.
The research is, let's say, very opinionated on this topic.
What does it say?
Normal teams are often virtual or distributed. FTTM teams are co-located.
So they want everybody in the same physical room, the war room.
The war room, the bullpen, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
They want the core team sitting shoulder to shoulder.
But come on, that research was probably written before we had Slack and Zoom and high-fidelity video conferencing and all these amazing remote collaboration tools. Surely we can replicate that co-location vibe virtually now.
The research, and frankly, my own experience with these kinds of projects, would argue no, not for this specific kind of bleeding-edge, high-uncertainty work.
What?
There is a bandwidth of communication that is lost when you're not physically present. It's the overhearing. You overhear a conversation between two engineers at the next table, and you realize they're making an assumption that affects your work, and you can correct it in 5 seconds.
The spontaneous collaboration.
The spontaneous problem solving. You see the look of stress on someone's face, and you know they're stuck, even if they haven't said anything. The research is very clear. If for some reason you absolutely cannot be in the same room full time, the core team must, at a minimum, meet in person for multiple days, at least once a month.
So that work from anywhere digital nomad lifestyle probably isn't a great fit for an FTTM project.
Not during the critical execution phase of a major launch. It just requires a level of presence and intensity that's hard to replicate through a screen.
Okay, so we've built this picture of an intense, co-located, authoritarian team of owners. But the reality, especially in big companies, is complexity. You can't just put 10 people in a room and build a new airplane. You're dealing with thousands of people across the globe.
You're dealing with what the research calls the problem of multiple.
Let's get into that. This is part 4, solving complexity. The research breaks it down into a few areas. Let's start with multiple sites. You have a team in Silicon Valley and a team in Taiwan. How do you keep them from becoming two separate companies that hate each other?
It's a huge challenge. The feeling of us versus them can develop really quickly. The FTTM solution is, first and foremost, aggressive rotation.
What does that mean?
It means you physically move people. Your key technical leaders from California must get on a plane and spend significant time in the Taiwan office. You cannot just be a name in an email or a voice on a conference call. You have to go there, walk the factory floor, have dinner with the local team, build real human relationships.
And what about keeping the work aligned?
You need a single, integrated master schedule. It becomes the ultimate scorecard, the single source of truth. Remote sites often feel like they're in the dark, that they don't know what's really happening at headquarters. The shared schedule provides that visibility and creates a sense of shared accountability. Reality is aligned across all time zones.
Okay, what about multiple companies? So suppliers, vendors, partners. That relationship is often adversarial by default.
It's transactional. I give you a purchase order, you give me the part, and if you're late, I yell at you. That mindset is a speed killer.
So what's the FTTM approach?
They talk about a contract mindset, but they don't mean it in a legalistic way. They mean it as a social contract. You have to bring your most critical partners inside the tent.
You treat them like they're part of the team.
You literally make them part of the team. You create a single empowered core team, and the key leader from your partner company is on it. You invite your main supplier to the war room, you show them the red charts and your own internal gaps.
That requires a huge amount of trust. You're showing them your weaknesses.
You are, but it reframes the relationship. You stop treating them like a vending machine and you start treating them like a teammate. You make it clear. If you fail, we fail. We are in this together.
Then there's the third, multiple stakeholders internally. Marketing wants this, sales wants that, engineering wants something else. Manufacturing says none of it is possible.
The classic tug of war. The research says the way to manage this is with a very strong voice of the customer, or VOC process, but with a critical twist.
What's the twist?
In most companies, marketing owns the voice of the customer. They go out, they do the focus groups, they write a big requirements document, and then they throw it over the wall to the engineering team.
And a million things get lost in translation.
Every single time. The FTTM model insists that the core team, the actual engineers and designers building the thing, must own the VOC process. They have to be in the room hearing from the customer directly.
So you want your top software architect to go on sales calls?
Yes. You want your lead hardware engineer to visit the customer's site and see how they actually use the product. You have to eliminate the layers of translation. If you are building something on the bleeding edge, you cannot afford to have the requirements filtered through 3 layers of management. The people with their hands on the keyboard need to understand the physics of the user's problem firsthand.
That makes a lot of sense. But it leads to another classic trap in product development: innovation. Everyone wants to be innovative. But the research has a stark warning about the simultaneous technology innovation and product development problem.
This is the big one. This is the innovation trap. It's what happens when you try to do fundamental scientific research on the same timeline as a product you've promised to ship to customers.
It's the we'll figure out the core algorithm in week 6 plan.
Right, and then week 6 comes and goes, and you still haven't figured it out, and your entire product launch is now held hostage by an unsolved research problem.
So what's the FTTM fix?
It's ruthless and disciplined. Isolate the innovation.
What does that mean?
The research proposes what they call the 10% rule. For any given FTTM product development project, a best practice is that less than 10% of the content should be new, requiring a true breakthrough.
So 90% of the product should be based on known, proven, existing technology.
At least, that feels really low to a lot of tech companies who pride themselves on being cutting edge.
It feels like you're not being ambitious enough.
It feels that way, but the research argues it's the only way to ship predictably. If you try to invent half your product from scratch against a hard deadline, you are not managing a project, you are gambling.
So what do you do with the really ambitious, innovative ideas?
You fund them separately. The research says you must separate your technology roadmap from your product development schedule. You have a team of scientists in a lab whose job it is to invent the next generation battery. They have goals and funding, but their work is not on the critical path for the phone that needs to launch this Christmas.
So once the new battery technology is proven, stable, and manufacturable,
then and only then does it get moved into a formal product development schedule. You de-risk the science before you bet the company's product launch on it.
Okay, we're coming into the final stretch here. We understand the structure, the team, the psychology, the traps to avoid. How do you actually steer this thing day to day? The research talks about a process called refresh planning.
This is the operational heartbeat of FTTM. It's what replaces the traditional weekly status meeting.
What's wrong with a status meeting?
In a normal status meeting, you go around the room and everyone gives their status. I'm on track. I'm green. I'm working on it. It's a passive reporting exercise.
And then 3 months later, the project is somehow 6 weeks late and nobody knows why.
Precisely. Refresh planning is completely different. The research calls it continuous pull-in. It's an active, aggressive, 4-step cycle that happens constantly, often daily.
Okay, what's step 1?
Look back. This is status, but it's ruthless. Not what did we work on, but what is 100% done. What did we actually complete yesterday?
Step 2.
Look forward. Based on the hard reality of step 1, we immediately recalculate the schedule. We reproject the finish date. And we look at the gap. Did we slip yesterday? Even by half a day?
Step 3.
Breakdown. If we slipped, we don't just note it. We stop and we dig into the root cause right then and there. Why did that task take longer than planned?
And finally, step 4.
Accelerate. This is the most important step. You don't just accept the slip and adjust the timeline. The team's job is to immediately brainstorm and implement a mitigation plan to pull that schedule back in.
To close the new gap you just created.
Exactly. Do we resequence other tasks? Do we add another person to this problem? Do we need to simplify the design? You do whatever it takes to neutralize the delay today, not next week.
It sounds like a military OD loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. But for product development.
That's a perfect analogy. It's a high-frequency, continuous cycle of replanning and course correction. You never let a delay go unaddressed. You never let the gap grow.
So let's try to wrap all this up. Part 5. Conclusion and takeaways. We have covered a huge amount of ground here, from the Project Monarch to the War Room to the $5 million cost of a single day. If you had to distill this entire Lateral Works FTTM philosophy down to its absolute essence, what would it be?
I think it comes back to that initial idea of being a system integrator. It's about recognizing that Your job isn't to follow a process or fill out a form. Your job is to deliver the right product to the right market at the right time, using the right team. And to do that, you have to accept that time is the single most valuable and perishable resource you have.
And flowing from that, the core value becomes truth.
It has to be. The entire system is built on a foundation of brutal honesty. A happy schedule is a comfortable lie. It makes everyone feel good for a little while, but it guarantees failure. A realistic schedule with a big, ugly, embarrassing gap staring you in the face, that's painful, that's uncomfortable, but it's the only tool that gives you a fighting chance to actually win.
It's giving the team permission to look at that ugly reality and not see it as a failure, but as the starting point.
Yes. The gap isn't a report card on your past performance. It's the target for your future innovation.
Here's a final thought I want to offer for you, the listener. We've spent this whole deep dive talking in the context of bleeding edge technology,
Right.
semiconductors, airplanes, but this central philosophy of pulling pain forward, I can't help but feel like it applies to almost any difficult endeavor.
Absolutely.
If you're renovating your kitchen, if you're training for a marathon, if you're writing a dissertation, the longer you wait to admit that the contractor is behind schedule or that you skipped your training runs, the harder it becomes to fix. The sooner you face the gap, the more time you have to close it.
It's a universal principle. But,
Yeah.
and this is the final crucial thought I want to leave you with, the research is very explicit that this entire system depends on one thing. It requires permission to be honest.
Permission to be honest. That's a powerful phrase.
It's everything. This system, this culture, can only work if the senior management environment actively rewards early problem identification. If a team lead can walk into their VP's office and say, "My new forecast shows we're going to be 3 months late," and the VP's reaction is to thank them for the early warning and ask, "How can I help you fix it?" Then you can do FTTM.
And if the reaction is to yell at them and fire them for being behind,
Then FTTM is impossible in your company. You will simply drive all the bad news underground. People will go back to the nonsense reporting of half-truths because they need to survive.
so the ultimate constraint isn't the technology or the schedule or even the team. It's the organizational culture.
It all comes down to trust. So the question for everyone listening is pretty simple. Do you work in an environment where you can tell the truth about a delay today? And if the answer is no, what would it take to change that?
That's the real deep dive, isn't it? It's not about the chart on the wall. It's about whether people feel safe enough to tell the truth about what that chart really means.
That's it in a nutshell.
Thanks for listening. In future episodes, we'll deep dive into these key best practices and provide practical advice. Until next time.